Hey folks, welcome back to the channel, your home for all content Lord of the Rings home. You're getting an after hours swags video, no extra charge. We're here today to talk about chapter 3 of the Mines of Moria raid. If you don't know, I released sort of these ultimate guide videos for chapters 1 and chapter 2 late last week. Thought I would get out this chapter 3 video as well. Basically, these videos are geared towards newer players and players who are going to be entering chapter 3 soon. Either they're working on it in their guild, or they're thinking about working on it in their guild, or whatnot. So basically what we're going to go over in this video is the basics to scoring, the mechanics, difficulty tuning, what the orcs are doing, what orcs you should be targeting. We're going to talk about the nuances of chapter 3, because in reality chapter 3 is significantly different than chapters 1 and 2, I would say. And we're going to be talking, of course, about what characters work well in chapter 3, what teams work well in chapter 3, all that stuff. And then we'll end with some footage. I've got some footage of Rohan III with Nuraz and Halbarad, and it's kind of this double summon team that I've grown particularly fond of using in chapter 3, because I think it showcases how different it is than chapters 1 and 2. So with that, let's just get right into it. Gain 400 points per living ally at the start of every ally's turn. That's really important right off the bat. That is super important. And I want to make note that if you have a character that summons, that counts as an extra living ally at the start of every ally's turn. So instead of getting the max amount of points for having 5 characters, you'll end up with 6 characters, plus, of course, multiplied by the difficulty factor. That's a lot of points. 600 points whenever an ally blocks an attack. Same when an ally evades an attack. I'm going to say that these are great, and it's obviously good when a team can do these things, either having nimbles or defensives or some sort of native block chance, but this is not where the majority of your points are coming from, and that's simply because of sort of the action economy of chapter 3. Basically, where most of your points are coming from are your characters being able to take turns while they're still alive, and gaining 10 points for each health percentage healed on an ally. So the first point and the last point I've found are where you get the majority of your points in chapter 3 of the Mines of Moria raid. So those are big. I also want to make a special note here where you have to be below 100% health for the 10 points for each health percentage healed on an ally to count. It counts for any healing. So regeneration, heals, passive healing, any of that stuff counts. You do have to be below 100% health for it to count. Okay, so living allies, health percentages, those are big. Let's talk about what orcs are really a menace in chapter 3, because I would say it's a little bit different than from chapters 1 and 2. So I think the biggest threat by far in chapter 3 of the raid is the War Drummer. And the reason is because on his basic, he's going to grant 15% turn meter to a random ally. And then on his special, he's going to take turn meter from your character, 30% turn meter. And so this chapter is about taking as many turns as possible relative to the orcs. Drummer is going to really, really mess that up, especially because they've got an assist mechanic. And so he can pass out turn meter even when he's on doing an assist, right? That's going to make it so that the orcs go very, very fast and your characters don't get a lot of turns in, right? He's my number one concern when I am going into chapter 3 of the Mines of Moria raid. Of course, Skull Crushers, awful. I would say probably, again, up there as one of the worst character or orcs to deal with, I should say, in chapter 3 of the raid, because of the slow. It's not really the damage so much as it's just the slow. For the same reason we talked about with the War Drummer. You're just taking fewer turns if you have everybody slowed than you would normally. The last orc I want to mention here is the Mangler. He's kind of a sleeper, to be honest with you, but it's for the very familiar reasons I just discussed. On his basic, he gives himself haste, right? So he's increasing his own speed by 30%. That turns out it's going to add up quite a bit. And when he's going a bunch, it means your characters are not going to be going as much relative to the orcs, and you're not going to do well in chapter 3 of the raid. Let's talk about the passive. So basically, you get all of the orcs from chapter 1, except for the bomber, and they don't have that passive that they had in chapter 1. Chapter 1, and they have a passive that basically gives them turn meter when they spawn back in, based on how many the previous orc had. It also gives them like plus 10% damage and resistance and that sort of stuff. That passive is gone. It's replaced with a new passive called this one. On spawn, they gain 1 stack of Unbreakable, right? So that allows them to kind of survive 1 fatal blow. And then whenever this character attacks the target enemy, on their turn, inflict marked for 3 turns and call a random ally to assist. If the enemy was already marked, inflict 1 stack of captured. On the end of turn, gain 1% turn meter for each enemy and each stack of captured on all enemies. And then on death, summon 1 random Moria Orc. So they still do get a little bit of turn meter, especially towards the end. That's just kind of a little bit of a ramp up mechanic, although I'm not sure this chapter really needs it. Maybe it's just to, kind of cap things in the future. Not sure. But on death, they summon 1 random Moria Orc. It does not come in with some set amount of turn meter. It comes in with 0 turn meter. So that's kind of an important consideration for maybe advanced people. But I think the part that I really want to dig down into right now is that this section here, it says whenever this character attacks the target enemy on turn, inflict marked, and then if marked, inflict 1 stack of captured. Currently, the way it works right now in game is, let's imagine a scenario where you have your character being attacked by an orc for the very first time. That orc is going to attack. They're going to apply marked, and then, because of their order of operations, I guess, that orc is going to see that there's a marked and apply a stack of capture. And then it's going to call an ally orc to come and assist, and that ally orc is also going to apply a stack of capture. So to recap, even if it's the first time your character's being hit, they have no banes on them, what ends up happening as a result of that 1 attack interaction from the orc is you end up with marked and 2 stacks of capture. At 10 stacks of captured, your character receives a fatal blow. They basically die. I will note, again, maybe this is more of an advanced thing. If your character has Unbreakable, it can survive some of these fatal blows. But then, if let's say your character has like 2 stacks of Unbreakable, they get hit at 10 stacks of capture, they're going to lose 1 stack of Unbreakable. So it's basically good for 1 sort of orc ally turn, if that makes sense. Okay, let's talk quickly about difficulty tuning, because it is different than all of the other chapters. And I don't know why it does this. When you don't have the rate up, it makes you kind of scooch over. It also doesn't show you, now that I'm even over on chapter 3, it's not showing me the recommended powers and whatnot. Basically, the recommended powers here are the same as they are for chapter 2. So for difficulty 3, it's 64k power. Okay, so let's talk about difficulty levels. And this is really, really important, okay? If you're going to take one thing from this video, I want it to be this. You should be doing all of your attempts with all of your teams on difficulty 3. And that is because this chapter does not score you by killing orcs or being able to control and land debuffs or banes on a cave troll, right? It's just about how many turns your character is taking relative to the orcs. There's a little bit of a survivability component in there, but I have yet to see a single person say, oh, I took my team into difficulty 2 and they actually got more points than if they were in difficulty 3. I've yet to see a single case. Doesn't matter the gear level, the actual level, the skill level, the star level. You should be taking every single team you have into difficulty 3. And kind of to showcase that, we're going to talk a little bit about what I'm calling the speed cheese. So let me translate over here. Okay, you're probably familiar with this website, right? LOTR.gg, in this particular webpage with all the stats. I've, of course, ordered it by speed because the chapter 3 scoring allows you to get points or score points when it's a character's turn and you have living allies. What you can do is just go faster than all the other orcs, and you're going to get a bunch of points. So the fastest character on the orc squad is the Shadow Seer. He has the same speed as Nuraz at 161. That means, I'll include Nuraz here, all of these characters can go 1 turn before the orcs go. What this means is that when you take a team of these characters, 5 of these characters, into difficulty 3, you are going to get a free 90k points. That means you should be doing 5 teams, 5 attempts every single time, right? Because even on my free-to-play account, I have like 2 teams that I use, or I have 3 teams that I use mainly for Chapter 3 that I feel comfortable taking into Chapter 3 and can do stuff with. The other 2 teams I just fill up with these characters. And I believe there's 16 of them, so you should be able to do that pretty easily. You can go down, dip down into this like Sam, Gamgee, Strider, Ajak, Arwen region, but you know, that depends a little bit on luck to make sure that your characters are going to survive. They have to go faster than the Skull Crusher because he's going to do an AoE. You may be asking yourself, oh, why not just take them into the highest difficulty they can? Then you can get more points that way with this sort of method. And the response there is basically in difficulties 4 and 5, the orcs either have more speed or they start with some amount of turn meter and you can't outrun them. So you instantly get wiped. So stick to difficulty 3 for now, but this is an easy way to give yourself 90k points per team that you don't have built up. So that's worth mentioning. Again, do everything in difficulty 3. Just promise me you'll do that. You're going to see a lot, get yourself a lot more points that way. But there's actually quite a bit of nuance to the Chapter 3 mechanics. It's really quite different from Chapters 1 and 2. I personally like, you know, it's a different puzzle to solve. It's got its issues, but I personally like that. You have to rethink about how you want to make your team comp here. Okay, here's some more specific details on Chapter 3 mechanics. Taunt and Provoke removes the current marked. So let's say you have one character, they've got marked and some captured. If you have another character that puts up either Taunt or Provoked, that first character no longer has marked. Marked is that forced taunt, right? That's what's going to get people, you know, a lot of capture stacks. They're going to start attacking the character with the Taunt and Provoke now. That does not, however, remove the capture stacks from that first character. Just removes the marked. If a character with marked goes under stealth, they lose marked. So think about Faramir or Elrahir, or, you know, the hobbits under like a Strider leadership, right? If they go under stealth, they lose marked. It does mean, however, that the orcs can kind of choose to attack whoever they want. So now is probably as good as time as any to talk about what I've observed basically happens in terms of targeting for Chapter 3 and the orcs. The first sort of person that they will always target seems to be a summon. So if there's no marked on the field, right, and there are 5 characters plus a summon, seems like they always go for the summon first. Or if somebody just got captured completely and they're out of the game, or somebody removed mark, it seems like they go for the summon first. Second, it seems like they then return to the person with the capture stacks. I feel like it's usually the person with the most capture stacks, but I think I've seen it go the other way as well. I feel like they really go for people with the capture stacks already. And then after that, it's kind of basically a toss-up, but it's kind of they finish off what they started, if that makes sense, with the other capture stacks. So that's just something to consider. It's almost always summons first, and then it's basically people who have the capture stacks. All right, currently, the first attack applies marked and then a stack of capture, with the second orc applying a second stack of capture. I mentioned that when we first read sort of the passive. I say currently because I'm not convinced that that's how it's supposed to work, but it is currently how it works. Another, currently, your character will still get marked and captured even if your character has nimble. I have confirmed this. It does not matter whether the orcs have Eagle Eye or not. Let's say I've just loaded into Chapter 3. I've got Legolas on my team. I use his, what I think it's Special 2. That gives him nimble. I've seen him get attacked right away. That first orc comes in, he immediately gets marked, he gets captured, and then the second orc comes in, he gets another stack of capture. So it doesn't seem like the nimble is doing anything there. It might be giving him more points. I'm not entirely sure. I need to pay more attention to that because that is supposed to be one of the scoring mechanics, right? But it's not, you don't get like one free attack with your nimble. It definitely goes through the nimble. Again, currently, because I'm not sure how it's intended to be. Killing an enemy orc with a character that has capture will reduce it by 1 stack. The character that has to kill the orc has to be the one that has capture stacks. Or phrased another way, if you want to reduce capture stacks on your characters, they have to be the one to kill the orc. It's not like anybody on your team can kill an orc and it reduces some person's capture stacks. You can resist capture and marked. So the reason I'm saying that you should not be focusing on killing the orcs is primarily because of this. Killing an enemy orc with a character that has capture will reduce it by 1 stack. If your character would have to be killing essentially 12 orcs for every rotation of orcs that go through, right? So there's 6 orcs on the enemy team, they each call to assist. So your character, when they went on their turn, would have to be killing 12 orcs to make sure that they didn't, get captured all the way, or more than that, actually. That's unreasonable, that you can't do that. So that's why I think it's better to focus on taunts, provokes, stealth, cleanses, that sort of thing. And you're basically playing a loaded game of hot potato. And that's essentially the goal for Chapter 3. So with that in mind, let's go to the character graphic here that I've made for Chapter 3. I've been posting these now in my Discord. Some people pointed out that I had the same description in Chapter 1 that I did for Chapter 2 for some of the meta teams. I went back, fixed that, and they're different this time. Appreciate pointing that out, and we got it fixed, and they're now on the Discord. Okay. On the left-hand column here, I have characters that can taunt and provoke. Pretty sure this is basically all of them. And I think they're very important because, again, like I said, you're playing a bunch of hot potato. So if one of your characters who is maybe a healer or a cleanser or a DPS or whatever gets marked and they've got 7 stacks of capture on them, if your tank gets taunt, you've essentially sort of given yourself some breathing room because that character is going to stay alive, so you're going to get the extra points for that, and now everything is going to move towards your tank. So I actually find it's pretty effective to have like 2 tanks on a team. And I think Biffer is actually really good here. And the reason I'm saying that is because he can give provokes out to somebody else. So he can kind of act as a more, as a tank in more than one way. He's not giving them to himself, he's giving it out provokes. So you don't have to have as many tanks. I mean, he's on the dwarf team, and the dwarf team is slow, so that's a whole other issue, but I think that's a very, very powerful ability, and I think going forward, anybody that can hand out taunts or provokes is going to be pretty powerful, which I'm curious about for the Sylvan Brothers release for the Shattered Timeline, to go along with Lord Balin. Okay, enough of that, though. In the right-hand column, we have heals and cleanses. You'll notice this is basically the same from Chapter 1. These are very, very strong characters to have here. Currently, I would say Bekaloo is the strongest because she can currently, and if you'll notice my usage from earlier, take that into consideration, she can currently clear a whole stack of capture. Nobody else can do that. That's very important. But other characters that I think are also very good, Halbarad, right? Because he's got a taunt and a heal. That's terrific. Goblin Chef, I think, is great because he can steal Unbreakable and give it to, the Great Goblin or somebody else on the team. Naramiri. Naramiri has a really low cooldown cleanse. I think that works really, really well. Balin's all right. And I think the last person to mention here, though, is definitely Arwen. That is because Arwen can apply immunity, and immunity is truly the buff you really want to be striving for to have in Chapter 3 of the raid. We're going to talk about it when we talk about Gondor, but that is the best buff to have for Chapter 3. The reason I didn't include characters like Stealth on here, there's just a few of them, and I think you can kind of figure out who they are and that sort of thing. I think it's Faramir, Frodo, Elrahir. That might be it. But also, I just wanted to keep it less cluttered. It's already getting kind of cluttered up here, so that stealth is sort of something to consider. However, I do like taunts and provokes more, and the reason for that is because I have a little bit more control over who is getting captured next. All right, let's talk about meta teams. You're going to see some familiar ones. Rivendell. Rivendell is, it's the best raid team. It is the best raid team. And I'm going to say it again, you should be going for Elrond. He's coming in November 1st. It's coming November 1st, so you've got some time to prepare. He will boost your raid scores significantly. Very, very good team. Here, I'd usually drop Lomian, and instead I go with Naramiri. And again, I think Arwen's actually the key here because she hands out immunity on her cleanse, her special too, right? Here's a little secret. Currently, capture is not considered a bane. So there's this interaction that happens essentially that if you have immunity on a Rivendell character, Lord Elrond can extend that immunity if they have capture, but not marked. So if the marked gets cleansed, but they have immunity, they can keep getting that immunity for extended for, you know, however many times you get lucky. And then that character can just keep taking hits and hits of capture, or resisting hits and hits of capture. That's pretty big. And I think that's why Rivendell actually kind of works so well in Chapter 3. Also, the revive that Elrond has is incredible, and his ability to slow characters down on the other team, also very good. A lot of turn meter manipulation is good in Chapter 3 as well. Let's talk about Gondor. Every time a Gondor character blocks, they get immunity. That's part of Denethor's leadership ability, I'm pretty sure. I don't personally have Gondor, but from what I've seen, from the videos I've seen, the footage, and just the screenshots, it seems like a pretty invested Gondor is really, really good. You still kind of want to keep them together as a whole team because their block chance is increased when they have that many, you know, Gondor allies alive. Something to consider. I know Torm used Balin with them, and I think he had some relatively okay success. So yeah, you can maybe swap out one member, probably Herondil. The reason I'm saying that is because I think Sergeant Aura adds defensive to the team, and defensive is a guaranteed block. And you just kind of remove the... One, it gives you more points, but you kind of just remove the chance element to it. So I think that's really good. Gondor seems to be very, very good for Chapter 3. People seem to be pretty happy, at least compared to like how the Haradrim turned out, right? Rohan III. With 2 plug-and-play characters. My footage is going to be with Halbarad because he's just really good in this chapter. But also you can do it with... I put Nuraz in there because he's got a summon. Aemir's got a summon. Nuraz also has defensive and a cleanse. It's really, really good in there. So there's a lot of theory crafting potential in there that I like. Eowyn also has a cleanse. They've got good turn meter manipulation as well. I think they're really, really good. I'm actually going to leave a video in the... either in the comments or the description to somebody in my Discord. His name is Night Hunter, and he does a Chapter 3 run where he runs the Rohan 3 with Gimli and Legolas, and he actually does very, very well. And I think that's a pretty good option, considering that Gimli and Legolas are now pretty relatively farmable, especially compared to Halbarad. So I think that's a good home for Gimli and Legolas if you're maybe on a newer or free-to-play side of things. I'll leave the link to that video down below. Radrim. Radrim have 2 cleansers and a healer. They've got 2 people who can do Provoke. They've got an AoE slow. They've just got general turn meter manipulation with Roble. So they've actually got quite a few, you know, like tools to deal with Chapter 3 pretty well. Again, kind of like Gondor, you just sort of need them all to be together, though. You don't want to take anybody out of the Haradrim team. It's pretty cookie cutter. Okay, lastly, goblins. Yeah. So Rivendell, Haradrim, and goblins have made it on this chart basically every single time. They're very good raid teams, all of them. The reason goblins work so well here, I think, and I've seen some footage of them doing pretty well, actually, getting over 500k relatively easily, is that they have, one, they're pretty fast. 2, they've got a slow that they can use. They've got a summon, and that summon also has a provoke. That's pretty good. It's the Goblin Guard, right? The Goblin tank, whose name I always forget. It's this one, Grimpa, right? Grimpa has a taunt, and then when he dies, he gets, like, replaced, right? That replacement is also a Goblin Guard, so it can also get provoked. So you kind of have, like, 3 tanks, and that's also one of the strong suits of Goblin, is that when that first character dies, another one comes in place. So you just end up having, you know, 5-6 people on the field for a very long time compared to a lot of other teams. Goblin Chef can also steal Unbreakables or haste from maybe a Mangler and give it to the Great Goblin, which is pretty good. As soon as they move Great Goblin out of the Premium's currency store, I think I'm going to probably try and, you know, I'm going to recommend that team to people. I think it's a relatively low investment team that does very well in most chapters of the raid. Same with Haradrim, but that's probably going to come down to, you know, where they put T-Beb, where they put Beklu, that sort of thing. Road to Rivendell does all right. They've got a bunch of stealth under Strider. They've got this weird thing with Merry and Pippin where they can get immunity, kind of, but I'm not sure how effective that is. It's okay. There's some workable stuff there. You would think dwarves would be good, right? Under Bifur leadership, they've got the ability to give everybody defensive, which gets them a bunch of points, right? They can have Gimli, Taunt. They have Bifur can pass around Provoke. If you have Fro can taunt as well. Now they've got Balin who can cleanse. Unfortunately, the sort of downfall of dwarves is that they're just not fast enough. And so they just don't end up taking as many turns, and they kind of just get outsped by the orcs. Although, again, you can do pretty well with the dwarves. It's not too bad of an investment. So R2R and dwarves are decent runners up here from what I've seen. Okay, I think that's what I want to talk about there. Let's look at some footage. This is a double summon team, right? So Amir's got a summon, Nuraz has got a summon. People keep asking me what the skill levels are for this sort of stuff. I don't think that's as important. I just want to show you what my thinking is when I go into one of these chapters, what sort of teams I'm using here. It's got 3 people who can essentially taunt. We got Halbarad, we got Eothane, and then when Nuraz is able to summon, that, you know, he will give out Provoke to Nuraz. I did a whole video on Nuraz about whether I think he would be good or not in raids. I think he actually is pretty good in raids. I still need to get his skills up to be a little bit higher so that he's automatically giving Provoke to the Cave Troll when he summons him, but I don't currently have that up. One thing I will say is that there's kind of an emphasis on using large characters in this game because of how powerful they are. I don't think they're that effective in Chapter 3. They're just too slow, and that speed kills them. Your goal is not to try and kill the orcs. If they just get targeted and can't even get a turn, then they're just kind of useless. So you notice I'm going to taunt here, take the capture stacks off of Halbarad, or hoping I need him to basically go. Even though Eowyn was captured first, then I switched to Halbarad, and now I'm switching to Eothane. I'm playing the hot potato game. I'm going to cleanse here, get rid of that slow. It's not super effective. I do like the double cleanse with Eowyn and Nuraz, though. And then basically you'll notice that the first person I'm going for is always the War Drummer. Got a little bit hosed here, I would say, with the 2 Skull Crushers is pretty brutal, because now this one is going to apply slow when he goes his first turn. Not very happy about that. That's fine. Just making sure that get a counter out. Can't summon yet because my summon is still alive, but as soon as Eothane kicks the bucket here, I'm pretty sure they're going to go straight for the summon. There's also sort of this weird interaction with Skull Crusher. You'll notice that they're probably going to go for the summon here. There's a weird interaction with the Skull Crusher. When they do their big AoEs, yep, see, go for the summon. The big AoEs can sometimes just target this character in the middle here where Eowyn is, what I call the leader slot, even though they don't need to be in that slot. We're probably going to go for Eowyn after this. Yep, person with the most capture stacks, and they're going to go for Halbarad. Just like I told you, that's kind of their target priority. But now I'm going to be able to summon. So at least I've got somebody else on the field. And then they're going to take the heat off of Nuraz and Eomer here. So, like I said, I kind of got hosed just because I got slowed so many times. I just couldn't keep up with the cleansing in that respect. Ideally, what you would want for something like this team, right, is that I summon with Eomer in my first turn. Eventually, the summon goes down. I can summon with Nuraz. Eventually, that summon goes down. But I can maintain my life of my other characters, especially Eomer, so that I'm able to get another summon out eventually at the end here. And in the past, I've gotten pretty much 500k plus points, I want to say, using this particular team. I didn't do it this time. That's okay, though. That's just kind of to demonstrate how you think about these Chapter 3 of the raid. And it's mostly just playing the hot potato game. You're not so worried about the orcs. Yes, it's good for, getting some of the annoying ones out of the way. And I think it's actually more important when you've got like a pretty maxed out, let's say, Rivendell team. So when you're actually, at the recommended power for difficulty 3, something you would be using in difficulty 3 of, let's say, Chapter 2. And then you can be thinking about how you want to optimize for that. So, for instance, for the Rivendell elves, you really only have one tank there, right? In Eladin. So what I like to do there is basically feed the marked and capture into Eladin. When they attack him, and if he's still got provokes up, Elrahir is going to ping him, right? Hopefully that drops them down low enough that it gets rid of the unbreakable. And then I can do that with a number of characters, with just Elrahir going normally and my other characters going normally. And then when Eladin goes again, I do his helicopter, and I can take out 3 or 4 orcs and reduce my captured stacks that way. So that's kind of one sort of situation there to think about if you don't have like maybe multiple tanks on the team. I think that's all I want to talk about here. Chapter 3 is really, really different. And I encourage you, you saw how quick that was. I encourage you to try out a bunch of teams. I've tried full tank teams. I've tried full cleanser teams. I've kind of tried a bunch of stuff to see what works. Break up your chapter 1 and 2 teams if you need to. They do not need to have the synergy so that you're killing orcs. You just need to survive. So I think that leads to some interesting opportunities for sure. But I think that's all from me for tonight. Appreciate you watching. Thanks for stopping by. Take it easy.